Hello everyone and welcome to our session today. My name is Robbie Wright. I've been with the AWS storage team for about 4 years, and I spent several years before that as an AWS partner and in roles that focused on on-premises storage. I am passionate about data, about how we use it, about how unlocking new value in data, or about how we unlock value in new data, about enabling new use cases, and about how we store that data to enable the opportunities that we know about now and the future ideas that we haven't even thought about yet. I believe that our cloud storage solutions at AWS provide the best possible outcomes for just about any workload in any organization in terms of data durability, resilience, availability, cost effectiveness, flexibility, scalability, and so much more. And I think that organizations of every size are beginning to realize the breadth of benefits of moving to cloud storage. They want to put an end to hardware refresh cycles and data migrations due to systems upgrades. At the same time, they want to increase their agility in delivering new capabilities to their businesses faster. So in this session, you'll learn about how moving to services like Amazon S3, Amazon EBS, FSx, or EFS provide better business value. We'll look at ways to manage costs with cloud storage, and we'll discuss the different methods of migrating on-premises data to the cloud. So as we talk with our customers, we hear about multiple different reasons that they want to move to the cloud. They tell us that digital transformation is a top priority, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Some organizations still want to strategically modernize a customer-facing or back-office process to streamline their costs or to provide a competitive differentiation. Other customers see competitors and other industries that are learning to adjust to the economic headwinds, the supply chain constraints, or the complications of a remote work environment because they're already on the modernization path with cloud. Development and process agility for current staff and teams is also key to many organizations. Development teams come to cloud almost by default nowadays. But economic demands also prioritize cost reductions and optimization, and many sectors of industry are facing a downturn in demand, where moving to cloud can actually allow lower spending for on-premises systems and lower management costs. The already existing goals of closing data centers is still a driver for many, and a decision to outsource applications also can drive that shift to the cloud. So I want to provide some insights from some of our customers who've already made these modifications or are in the process of moving to the cloud. Massive data growth isn't a new topic, but the new challenge is how to actively create value with the data that you store. Data is not passive. You have to store it in a way that allows you to use it to derive value. The amount of data that's created over the next 3 years will be more than the amount of data that was created over the past 20 years. The world is going to create over 3 times more data over the next 5 years than it did in the previous 5. And by 2023, more than 40% of the world's data will be stored in hyperscale cloud data centers. Enterprises expect 30 to 40% data growth annually. Adoption of cloud services by these enterprise organizations to replace or complement their existing infrastructure has evolved at a rapid pace, and most organizations are actively using cloud in one form or another today. An organization managing 10 petabytes of data today will likely generate and store nearly 14 petabytes of data the following year. This data growth is only accelerated by the need to mine the data for greater insight via AI and analytics. In many cases, this pace of growth may exceed existing capacity plans and quickly pressure the limits of on-premises infrastructure. Unexpected data growth variables, for example, the precipitous rise in remote work during 2020, only puts pressure on organizations to quickly adapt to new realities. The COVID-19 pandemic, while a unique occurrence, has given us some great examples of how organizations are adapting to disruption by leveraging the operational agility and the economic advantages of the cloud. AWS is leading the market in developing storage services that help you run your applications better, move your data faster, store your data more cost efficiently, and ultimately turn that data into a strategic asset. Amazon EBS delivers highly available and performant block storage for your most demanding business-critical applications like databases and ERP systems. By leveraging fully managed file solutions like Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, the customers or Amazon FSx for Lustre, customers can use the same file systems that they use on premises today, but they no longer have to worry about the administrative overhead of setting up, securing, maintaining, and backing up that infrastructure. With its low storage cost, unlimited scalability, 11.9's durability, and almost 15-year record of operational excellence, Amazon S3 and S3 Glacier is the best foundation for a data lake. Because S3 is object storage, all of your data can be stored in its native format, allowing you to retain flexibility to adapt to different use cases in the future. And S3 has multiple different storage classes and a vast array of management functionality that helps you reduce your storage costs. Application modernization using microservices is also one of the top priorities for IT executives today. Microservices architectures break applications into many smaller, simpler processes that can be scaled independently. Serverless computing is a valuable component of microservices architecture. And S3 has been at the heart of serverless computing, with customers triggering Lambda functions off of event notifications to accomplish an endless number of tasks that used to be complex and costly. This year, we also announced support for AWS Lambda with Amazon EFS. This integration expands use cases for serverless computing by providing persistent storage for applications that require a shared file system for multiple instances to read from and write to, repeated access of many files, or files that are larger than 512 megs to store a library of files for an instance. And as customers run more workloads on native cloud services, they've asked us for new tools to help them handle backup and compliance. AWS Backup has become one of our fastest growing services because it makes it so simple to manage backups of resources like EFS file systems, EBS snapshots, FSx backups, or DynamoDB or RDS backups. And on the topic of data transfer methods, AWS provides a portfolio of different data transfer services to align the right solution and cost to data migration projects for your hybrid cloud storage and online and offline data transfer needs. What was once a build versus buy comparison has become, we couldn't build that. The scale, the innovation, the variety of global cloud services within AWS is the enabler of businesses and not just a replacement infrastructure. Organizations relying on on-premises compute and storage infrastructure often deal with issues like inherited storage silos, tightened IT budgets, operational overhead, and unpredictable resource requirements. Adoption of cloud services by enterprise organizations to replace or complement their existing infrastructure has evolved at a rapid pace. In a recent IDC report, they noted that the total cost of ownership and upfront costs are some of the least important factors driving the decision to use cloud instead of other alternatives. We believe this further highlights the growing prioritization of other cloud benefits like higher performance, better security, global reach, and most importantly, access to adjacent services. The economic benefits of cloud storage capacity are well understood, but I believe customers will see the greatest long-term value as they realize how well adjacent services and tightly integrated partner offerings can help them create value out of the data that they stored, especially as they start to learn how to extract value from long, inactive data sets sitting in their archives or in a storage silo somewhere else in the organization. Digital transformation remains one of the primary drivers for application migration and modernization initiatives, and this trend isn't slowing down. Modern cloud storage services are a key component of digital transformation initiatives. One important piece of this puzzle is maintaining a flexible IT infrastructure. Changes must be made in budgeting and efficiency when it comes to enterprise IT, and storage will be a key contributor to both the efficiency and the cost savings in the immediate future, as well as an enabler of new competitiveness going forward. In light of the pandemic, IDC expects enterprises to continue to allocate more budget to the cloud. Prior to the pandemic, 78% of IDC respondents reported that their cloud budget had increased in the past 2 years, and they expect that trend to continue. In the second quarter of 2020, though, spending on public public cloud IT infrastructure surpassed spending on traditional IT infrastructure for the first time. Now, that's not a huge surprise. We've been trending in that direction for quite a while now, but the trend actually accelerated this year. The pandemic has accelerated moves away from hardware infrastructure for practical reasons, like a desire to keep employees safe from physical dangers. It's accelerated moves that customers were already planning to make to the cloud. But what we've heard most is that customers moved to the cloud because it allowed them the flexibility to respond to this shockwave that's crossing their businesses in a way that they could never do with on-prem infrastructure. So not only did moving to the cloud reduce their costs, it also enabled them to scale seamlessly and address new business challenges. So let's double click on cloud costs for a bit. When looking at cloud pricing, it's tempting to just go compare the cloud storage costs against the acquisition cost of storage hardware. But that doesn't show you the full picture. In traditional on-premises infrastructure, there are several other costs that you don't incur when you're running in the cloud, including things like the cost of data center space, power and cooling, the cost of building and maintaining a network, hardware, software maintenance expenses, the headcount cost to operate all that infrastructure. You also typically incur the cost of underutilization in on-prem environments. That is any storage capacity that you've purchased but you aren't using is in effect increasing your per gigabyte cost of data stored. In contrast, using services like Amazon S3 and Amazon EFS, when you delete data, you stop paying for that storage. So there's no underutilization expense with those services. And finally, when on-premises, you pay for the cost to migrate data from one system to another, which can be substantial, particularly in the cost of time. So that periodic migration is gone when you move to cloud storage. And you also get to take advantage of real-time improvements in cloud storage services. In the cloud, your costs follow your workload's usage patterns much more closely. You pay for the data stored, of course, and depending on the service, you may pay for requests made to the service. For example, to get data, to get and retrieve data, or to move data between tiers, and you may pay for data transfer out of the service. These are all costs you would have borne as fixed expenses in things like networking infrastructure on premises. We've just made it so you only have to pay for the portion of those resources that you actually use in the cloud. And then you have the ability to cost optimize your applications over time in the cloud and stop paying for as many of those resources, something that you just can't do on premises when you've already made that investment. So I'd encourage you to take a look at awstcocalculator.com and get an idea of some of the common patterns that we see with our customers. They're baked into that tool, and get an idea of the total costs to run in an AWS environment. I think you'll find that they're very favorable to running on premises. But similar to what we saw from IDC earlier, CIOs tell us that cost is not the key factor in their decision to move to the cloud. Agility and innovation are usually at the center of their motivation. However, being at least cost neutral is table stakes before considering any migration to the cloud. We typically see at least 20% savings with just a lift and shift of an application. Over the first months, customers continue to optimize their EC2 instances and S3 storage for an additional 20 to 30% savings. And then by adopting higher level managed services, customers further optimize, many seeing savings of 60% or more. This is an important point to consider. The benefits of cloud services and the opportunities to optimize operations, agility, and economics continue as you scale your operations in the cloud. Continual innovation, new features, and new services become a catalog that you choose from rather than new projects you need to build, and their benefits become cumulative. Let's look at Amazon S3 as an example. Since its introduction in 2006, S3 has constantly innovated on behalf of our customers to make cloud storage more cost-effective and easier to manage. The graph that you see to the left on this slide shows over 80% reduction in the price of the S3 standard storage class since 2006 when it launched. Now let me share a bit about how we think about storage classes and total cost reduction. S3 storage classes provide customers with different ways to store their data in S3, and they're a reflection of AWS's pricing principles. These principles are not unique to S3, but they're really an AWS-wide concept. In S3, they guide our thinking when it comes to storage classes. First, no upfront cost. There's no capital investment required, and that allows you to innovate faster. Second, it's pay as you go. You can scale up and scale down and just use the amount of storage that you want. That actually means that you don't underutilize your storage because you really pay only for what you use. However, the more you use, the less you pay, which is the third principle. For example, in the S3 standard storage class, you have automatic integrated volume discounts. The more storage you use, the less you pay. And finally, there's the principle that you pay less as AWS grows. That really means we innovate on behalf of our customers. Over time, we've launched more regions and more availability zones. We've introduced more storage classes, and we've passed savings on from our customers in the form of price reductions. And on the right, you can see how we've continued to add more storage options over time. Most recently, we launched 2 new storage classes in S3 Intelligent Tiering and S3 Glacier Deep Archive. We launched all these different storage classes, though, because customers told us that they have use cases for which they want to store data in S3, but they're looking for the ideal storage class. S3 Intelligent Tiering is an example of a new feature that we added to help customers continue optimizing their operations and costs long after they've made the move to AWS storage. S3 Intelligent Tiering is an Amazon S3 storage class designed to optimize storage costs automatically when data access patterns change, without performance impact or operational overhead. It was the first cloud storage class to deliver automatic cost savings by moving data between 2 access tiers, a frequent access tier and a lower cost infrequent access tier when access patterns change. And we recently extended the cost savings capabilities of S3 Intelligent Tiering by adding 2 additional access tiers, Archive and Deep Archive, to automate the full data lifecycle in a single self-managed storage class. Now let's talk about what customers are actually building on AWS storage. Lots of customers start simply with a storage-only migration. They look for these workloads that don't really require an application migration, and they start their cloud journey by just moving the data. Backup and restore is usually an easy place to start because it's relatively non-disruptive to existing IT processes. And practically every major backup software vendor integrates directly with Amazon S3. Customers with large data archives for long-term data retention or for regulatory compliance are also quickly moving to AWS because they know how unreliable and costly their on-premises tape infrastructure is. By moving that data to AWS, they can save a lot of money, and they can also ensure that that data is there when they need it because of the constant data validation and fixity checking that we perform at AWS. Home directories are another storage-only move that can provide significant storage cost savings with minimal disruption to existing processes. And over 10,000 customers to date have built their data lakes on AWS. They choose AWS storage because they know that data movement is one of the hardest parts of building a data lake. By storing their data in AWS, they can bring a variety of analytics tools to the same data set, eliminating the data movement complexity and tearing down data silos. By consolidating all of that data in one place, it makes an AWS data lake an excellent foundation for artificial intelligence and machine learning data used in high-performance computing environments, or just large-scale big data analytics. However, one of the most common sets of workloads that customers want to move to AWS is their business-critical applications. Things like their ERP solutions, databases, and the content management systems for their websites. And often they simply want to lift and shift those applications into the cloud without making major changes right away. AWS also provides a number of services to make these lift and shift migrations possible, while also helping customers save money in the process. As you begin your journey to the cloud, you'll quickly notice one thing across pretty much any workload that you want to migrate or deploy. Storage is central. A well-architected data storage strategy helps you turn storage from an expense into a strategic asset. And AWS storage is absolutely the best at helping customers get more data, get more value from their data faster. It's a foundation for advanced innovation, and customers start finding value from the moment that they move their storage to AWS. AWS storage often accelerates customer business transformations like this. First, customers build a new application or migrate an existing one to AWS, leveraging our offerings for development or application discovery, tracking, and movement. AWS has the most options for moving data in the industry, making it simpler to move any kind of data onto the AWS platform. Once their data is in the cloud, the reliability, security, and management capabilities only found with AWS kick in. AWS has more compliance certifications than any other vendor. Customers using AWS can take advantage of security capabilities that are built to meet the needs of the most demanding organizations on Earth, capabilities that many organizations would never have access to in their on-premises environments. Then when they build with AWS and more third-party partners than you can find anywhere else, the systems that pull insights from that data, from this data at scale, customers like Infor, that works with thousands of Microsoft SQL databases, or FINRA that plays back the U.S. stock market in real time, or Monsanto that moved their petabytes of geospatial analytics to the cloud. They get this real value. And then customers develop new use cases that transform their businesses. Sony DADC, for example, cut media workflows from weeks to hours. iRobot is mapping connected homes with millions of robots without managing any servers. Sprinklr can recover thousands of servers and petabytes of data in another global region in less than 4 hours. SiriusXM took a small custom application acquisition to global production scale in 90 days. This kind of innovation has drawn millions of customers to leverage AWS storage services, and that success has created a flywheel effect that allows us to bring you more innovation at an accelerating pace. Let's look at some other customers. Georgia Pacific is an American wood products, pulp, and paper company. They're one of the world's largest manufacturers and distributors of paper, wood, and gypsum building products. Georgia Pacific wanted to gain new insights from manufacturing data collected at paper production plants, but they were relying on a number of disparate sources to analyze data on material quality, moisture, temperature, and other features. These data silos created a huge hurdle for them. So they started by building a data lake on Amazon S3. Then they built an AWS advanced analytics solution using Amazon Kinesis and Amazon SageMaker to collect and analyze data from equipment at their manufacturing facilities spread all across North America. This helped them to do things like predicting equipment failure 60 to 90 days in advance, run their production lines in a more predictable manner, and increase product quality. Steve Bakalar, their Vice President of IT and Digital Transformation, said, "We're using AWS data analytics or data analysis technologies to predict precisely how fast converting lines should run to avoid tearing. By reducing paper tears, we've increased profits by millions of dollars for one production line. That will scale across different assets at Georgia Pacific." Teespring is an online platform that lets creators turn unique ideas into custom merchandise like t-shirts, mugs, and phone cases that their fans can buy. They wanted to reduce their storage costs and technical debt as their business grew. Millions of people bring their design ideas to Teespring, and the company has to store data for those users and all the products they create. As Teespring's businesses grew rapidly, their data also grew exponentially to a petabyte and then beyond. Because their engineers were focused on scaling up the service to handle the demand, the data stored in Amazon S3 wasn't always well organized. S3 Intelligent Tiering offered an easy path for Teespring to gain some significant savings. They just moved entire buckets into S3 Intelligent Tiering, which automatically transitions objects between different storage tiers based on how those objects are accessed. But it was the launch of another feature called S3 Batch Operations that gave Teespring the ability to regain full control of legacy data in S3. Their objects in S3 didn't have enough metadata associated with them to figure out what storage class they should be in or whether they needed it at all. They needed a way to apply their own business rules to S3 objects at a massive scale. Teespring created a number of rules based on creator and buyer behavior data to define the appropriate storage class for objects. For example, if a product hadn't been available for purchase for years, they moved its assets to a lower cost storage class. The company then pulled information from its data warehouse in Amazon Redshift to generate manifest files that S3 batch operations could use, which specified exactly which objects could be moved to S3 Glacier with no impact to the business. So in the end, Teespring was able to save more than 30% on storage costs using S3 tools to move data to the right storage tier. And they were able to do that in a fraction of the time that it takes to do the same things in other environments. Discover is another example of an AWS customer. Most of you probably know know Discover from their credit cards or their personal loan products. In total, they do about $144 billion per year in credit card sales volume alone. Discover has multiple lines of business that utilize analytics to gain insights. They have marketing teams using analytics to determine their best avenues for growth. They have analytics teams doing fraud detection so they can understand if their cardholders are at risk or have been compromised. They have data scientists performing credit analysis to determine if issuing a credit card or a loan to a specific individual is a good choice for the company. And the list goes on and on. In total, Discover has about 500 data scientists performing analytics. What they found was that when they looked across the company, between lines of business, there were differences in the tools they were using for analytics. There was no data sharing. They had very little collaboration between teams regarding best practices for the methods that they were using or the findings from the analysis that they were performing. They had challenges with teams not getting access to the right data and working from common data sets. And each one of the teams had their own managed instances of code, of data, and of compute and storage. And so they sought to simplify that model. Discover wanted to gain more consistency, collaboration, and efficiency in their data science processes. Originally, they were running analytics on premises, and the nature of data science work is often compute intensive, and the work that they do is very project based, which equates to fluctuations in demand. The cloud model, where they didn't have to provision for peak capacity and could support the compute needs of all their users when they needed access to the resources, made a whole lot of sense for Discover. Their first step was to stand up file servers on EC2 using a third-party file storage solution. This required Discover to have a dedicated team to manage EC2 instance provisioning, do capacity forecasting, and to understand data growth to ensure that they had enough provision capacity for their users and to ensure that the system was configured to meet their high availability requirements. The challenge with this model was that they were dedicating resources that could be applied to more productive activities that would benefit their data scientists more. So they viewed it as a wasted resource. On top of that, they found that the direct cost of running self-managed file storage on EC2 could be extremely high. When they looked at their AWS invoice, the line item for those EC2 instances with a third-party file system was actually higher than the line item for the EC2 instances that were actually doing the computing. They eventually evolved their model to take advantage of fully managed AWS storage services like Amazon EFS to provide better stability, improve operational efficiency for their storage environment, and to reduce cost. By moving to EFS, Discover was able to reduce the amount of time that was required to manage storage infrastructure by 90%. Another AWS customer, Ancestry, is a global leader in family history and consumer genomics, using family trees, historical records, and DNA to help people on their journeys of personal discovery. Ancestry has 18 million plus people in its consumer DNA network. Ancestry DNA uses advanced genomic details and science to give them more ways to explore their DNA matches and connect to more precise or create more precise insights for their customers. Ancestry wanted to leverage on-demand computing in the cloud to scale the frequency of speed and experimentation in their genomics analysis processes. Those processes are characterized by spiky, unpredictable workloads, which required them to scale compute and throughput quickly and then tear down environments on completion of a job. The ad hoc variable demand of their storage environment made managing their on-premises Isilon cluster too difficult. Ancestry chose to migrate from their Isilon cluster on premises to a fully managed AWS file storage service in Amazon EFS. They were given a time frame of 6 months to complete the migration. They were also given a requirement that the migration had to maintain the consistency and availability of their analytics environment so that their data scientists could remain productive. They completed the project in 5 months from planning, from the start of planning actually, to complete cutover, with no disruption to the productivity of their data scientists, the data science team. In the end, they increased productivity. The IT team no longer spends time fixing and maintaining on-premises file systems, and they improved agility. The data science teams can now quickly spin up the resources required to perform their analytics jobs, improving their ability to perform experiments quickly. Expedia Group is a leading online travel company that encompasses not only Expedia.com, one of the world's largest full-service online travel agencies, but also Hotels.com, Hotwire.com, and other travel brands. They had 20-plus offices, each with their own file storage that made it difficult to manage scale. They were also faced with costly hardware refreshes. They needed to enable their regional offices to easily store and access shared files. They used fully managed SMB file shares with Amazon FSx for Windows file server to consolidate multiple very large file servers and reduce their hardware footprint. They no longer have to worry about each office managing hardware and extending capacity and end users getting better performance. Using FSx for Windows file server, they were able to lower their initial TCO and later realize an additional 70% savings with features like HDD storage and data deduplication as those were added to the service later. They also achieved significantly higher data durability with multi-AZ file systems and built-in redundancy. Experian is a credit monitoring and reporting organization that uses financial data to help individuals and businesses make better informed decisions and maximize opportunities. They're constantly innovating on solutions ranging from demystifying credit data to preventing identity fraud. They recently turned their focus toward giving business customers cutting-edge tools for managing financial data, and Experian needed to give its customers a place to test, analyze, and manipulate huge quantities of financial data. Using Amazon EBS, EMR, and an array of other AWS services to manage big data and provide top-level security, Experian developed a high-performance award-winning suite of analytical tools called Ascend that helped them increase revenue 540% in less than 2 years. It also helped them create a COVID-19 pandemic tool in under 30 days and enable customers to test, analyze, and manipulate over 3 petabytes of data. So hopefully these examples have been helpful for you in imagining some of the ways that you can create new value using AWS storage and other adjacent services from AWS and our partners. I want to leave you with a few quick thoughts. First, data growth is an opportunity, not a problem. The key is to understand how to use the data to derive value. The capabilities, scale, agility, and innovation in the cloud are drawing more workloads from on-premises. You'll be most successful if you start planning how you're going to leverage the cloud now instead of waiting until your competition builds an advantage by moving first. Moves to the cloud will usually reduce your total cost of ownership, but there's a much bigger opportunity to create new value with the scalability, performance, and agility of cloud storage. Optimization is only the beginning. Moving to the cloud will give you tons of new capabilities through ongoing innovation. So to help you understand what to do next, I've provided you a few resources that you can use that are related to what we discussed here today. We'll provide these in post-session content, or you can find these and other resources on the AWS Storage blog. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of reInvent, and we look forward to hearing from you about what you've built with our AWS storage solutions.